views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Fashionistas Home Edition. I am your host, Flores Rebello. It is a pleasure to have you join us on this beautiful afternoon. We trust that you and your loved ones are well and staying safe. In today's Bellas Fireside Chat conversation, we welcome the director of Leaders of Color, New York, of Education Reform Now, a program that recruits Black and Brown leaders for public office who will speak to us about changing the narrative and why you should be civically engaged. Please join me in welcoming Latina trailblazer and Puerto Riqueña, Damary Bonita Rodriguez. Damary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me and for the opportunity to address your wonderful audience. And as you said, it is a beautiful afternoon, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Thank you. And that is, by the way, Dr. Bonita Rodriguez, everyone. She does have a PhD, and I just think that as a Latina who has reached such a high level of education, that we do honor you, Damary. And I want to congratulate you for that, because you are an example, and you're paving the way for a lot of not only Latinos but also brown leaders that you have actually been training to be more engaged in the political aspect. Now, Dr. Bonilla, can you tell us more about who you are and what you really do?
Sure. Well, thank you for that. It's always a juggle between using the credentials and not, because I am Damary, but the realization is what you just mentioned, that there aren't enough of us that have achieved these high levels of academic and visible leadership roles. And so we do have to celebrate it, not just for ourselves, but for others. And the more important aspect of my achievements is, what doors are these opportunities able to open for other individuals, for other Black and Latinos who are looking to change the political landscape, the leadership landscape. And so I love that you mentioned that I'm Puerto Riqueña. I was born and raised in New York City. I consider myself Nuyorican. I was raised in Spanish Harlem. I'm the eldest of three sisters. I lost my mom when I was 8 years old. She was a victim of homicide. And so I always say I was born into negative statistics between having a teen mother who was a single mother and the way that she left us when she was just 27 years old. But the shift and the opportunity that I had was to access higher education through focusing on education as an opportunity to overcome those statistics and become a positive statistic of one of less than 4% of Latinas in the United States that have a doctoral degree. And then more importantly, as we both have said, using that to benefit others. And so at the Leaders of Color program, I have the opportunity to train Black and Latino leaders to run for political office, to hold visible roles in government or in their communities, to be able to have a positive impact and change the lives of those in their communities that need a voice, that need representation. And I appreciate you and the platform that you've created to let individuals like me talk about important topics such as, why should you be civically engaged? And it's such a relevant topic right now, and I just appreciate the partnership.
As we know, primaries are coming up soon, where we have to be able to vote for a new president or a new councilman, assemblyman, senator, congressman. And this is a time for us to take this moment to educate our youth, to educate our community, and really exacerbate the reason why this is so important, to be able to vote, to have a voice. And, you know, with everything that's happening with George Floyd, this is a time when we need to come together, not as not only as people, but ethnic backgrounds, because we are all one at the end of the day. And what happens to one really it's a domino effect. It affects everyone else. So I want to encourage you, take advantage of this conversation, take advantage of Dr. Bonita Rodriguez, my dear friend Damaris, that we are going to continue to have these conversations moving forward. So opening it up, Dr. Bonita Rodriguez, why is it important for anyone to be civically engaged?
You're right. We're going to continue the discussions because it's important that we continue to educate our community. And so I want to start off with talking about what is civic engagement, which is the process by which you as an individual or you as part of a group of people address concerns that are important to you personally, to your community, to society broadly, and that you engage to bring about change, whether, again, for your local community or for society. And it's an opportunity to be a change agent. And one of the reasons that you should be civically engaged is because all of these issues are impacting your life. Even if you don't see it, right now, with everything that is happening in society, people are realizing to a certain level that they've been impacted by some of those positions that you've talked about, the city council, the state assembly, the state senate, by the decisions that are being made. But people don't always realize that. Sometimes they feel disconnected and disenfranchised and they don't vote because they feel like their voice is not heard. It doesn't matter. Their vote doesn't count. You often hear topics like that, comments like that in our community specifically. People don't feel like they're being listened to, but I always say your vote is your voice and you have to vote so that you can be heard. And I think situations like the current dynamics around racial inequities, around the relations with the police officers across the country, and all of the dynamics that we're seeing play out day to day are a realization for some individuals that, oh, wow, these elected officials are not just in this comfortable seat and being paid, but actually they're making decisions for me. Some decisions that I may agree with and some decisions I may not agree with. And to some extent, they may not be representing me. And that's where your comment comes in. If somebody is not representing your values, you need to go to the polls and make a difference and try to be one of those votes that brings about change in your community for somebody who does care about the community and represent your values. You're not always going to win, but it's a start to get to the poll. And so we should be civically engaged as an opportunity to be a positive agent of change. And I always say that if you're not putting in the effort, then you can't complain, right? You have to be part of the solution. And we do have a responsibility to ourselves, to our youth, as you mentioned in the beginning of this discussion, to the elderly and to other vulnerable populations to take action on their behalf.
I'm very happy that you were able to bring that up, that people complain. They complain. And, you know, my parents, when I was younger, they always encouraged us to be able to cast a vote. And, you know, in the Dominican Republic, I mean, politicians are politicians at the end of the day, no? But there's so much unfairness happening that they're doing to the community that it affects them. And, you know, and they always instilled in us that when you get the opportunity, you better vote. You better vote and better vote. And I want to give a shout out to our dear friend, Wendy Garcia, who works at the New York City Comptroller's Office, Scott Stringer, who really instilled in me she was the other person that God used. Like, you need to know how to do this. You need to learn this. You need to do that. And because of her, I've been able to not only vote because I was going to vote. I mean, I was voting regardless, but to take action and taking action, getting involved. For example, you know, I was able to work a few hours when Congressman Adriano Espaillat, the first Dominican congressman in the U.S. Congressional office, was able to win. And, you know, and I know it takes, it's a process. It does take time, but I felt so good, Dr. Bonita Rodriguez, when I was able to help, and I said, no, he's going to win. He's going to do it. God has purpose for him at the end of the day, and let alone it happened. And it was such a relief because he has been a voice for us, for the Latino community. And we have to do that. And you said, people complain. Yes, you complain. If you don't vote, then how are you going to be able to elect someone? Now tell us, what are the steps that we should do in order to vote, in order to get to the ballot and say, okay, let me vote for this?
That's a great question, because one of the things that I want to know is that we don't all have to be engaged at the same level or with the same energy or taking the same steps, right? Voting is one that if you're 18 or over and you're a citizen of the United States, you're able to vote, right? So that's one that anybody who falls into those categories can do. As long as you register to vote, you can vote. But there are lots of other ways to be engaged as well. And you touched on something. You said, Adriano Espaillat became the first Dominican congressman in the country. And that is the kind of change that can happen when people come together and become engaged. When you, as an individual, believed in him and believed in a purpose that you saw, you became engaged, you donated, volunteered, your hours. You can donate. I don't know if you did or didn't, I'm not asking, but you can donate financially. You can dedicate time, volunteering, energy, your gifts, anything that you think will help that candidate. If they win, it's great, right? We all celebrate. But even if they don't win, we still celebrate the fact that they're in the race, that they have a platform to be a voice for individuals like themselves, like you, because maybe nobody else has been, right? Who's been speaking for Dominican Americans in Congress before? I mean, ideally you have an ally who would do that, but if not, you need people to be the ones breaking these barriers, and he cannot do it alone. He needs volunteers, he needs financial support, as do all of those of us that are trying to change the landscape. And I know, because I became the first Hispanic male or female elected to the East Stroudsburg Area School Board in November of 2019. And it's been a long time coming. And my realization was, if I had not run for that seat, we would have closed another decade without the Latino voice there. And as one of 9 members, I find myself always talking with my colleagues about, this is how the Latino community experiences things. This is the difference in our family dynamics. This is the way we view the world. Who's doing that for you, if not somebody who represents your values? That said, the first thing that you can do, which everybody can do and has a responsibility to do, is what you talked about, and that's getting educated. You talked about Wendy Garcia. Shout out to Wendy. She's a Latina colleague that I've worked with for a long time, and I'm actually talking to her tomorrow. But, we have her as an opportunity to be able to engage with Scott Stringer's office and have that diversity lens. But if you don't have that, how can you learn about who is in the seats, who is responsible for what? You need to get educated. So the first step is to research individuals, leaders, who's on their staff, what are the values that they're pushing for, what are the policies and laws, and how do certain systems work, right? So reading about current issues, reading about elected officials representing us, reading about the different issues that we need to vote on related to criminal justice reform, education reform, all of these areas that really do impact you and you may not realize. And then being able to attend events so you can learn that, so you can engage with individuals, and you get a vibe by watching people, by talking to people. You might say, that person has been representing me for 10 years and I hadn't met them off of what I saw on TV. But now that I've met them, I love them and I want to work for them and volunteer and support them. Or opposite, you might say, I really don't have a good vibe from them and I'm going to work to get somebody else elected. The other thing that you can do to take action, because we know that it takes a community, is to join a march or a rally, to write a letter to your elected officials, to your leaders, to voice your opinion and express your concerns. One example that I'll give is Leaders of Color New York, which is the chapter that I lead for the organization. We were not happy with the Amy Cooper situation in Central Park, and one of our fellows drafted a letter. We worked on it together, and we sent it out. We sent it to the governor, to the mayor, to the New York City Human Rights Commission, to the district attorney's office for the borough of Manhattan, and several other key offices that we wanted to share our voice with, to say we were not happy about this. We want you to know. And if there is anything in your power that you can do or that your office can do, we expect that you will be responsible to do that. So these are opportunities for you to share. You can attend town hall meetings. You can give public comments at the school board meeting. Just be sure that you're out there. In terms of voting, which was the question that you had, once you register to vote, you have the opportunity to vote not just for the president of the United States, but for various offices. And one of the things that voters do not realize, because we have a lot of work to do to educate our community to be really savvy voters, is that they don't realize the local politics, what, involvement the school board has, and, what the community board does in their community. And so when you go there to cast your vote, don't just vote for the president of the United States because you see that person on TV all the time and you know that that's an important seat, and then you walk out and don't vote locally. Politics is local. So be sure that you're voting for the representatives that are in your community that you have access to more regularly, because you don't have access to the president that way, but you can walk into the district office of your city council person or your state assembly person or your state senator and be able to talk with somebody in their community and say, I have these concerns and I'd like to voice them.
We will take a quick break, and when we return, Dr. Bonita Rodriguez will discuss why it is important to become civically engaged and how you can make a positive change in your community. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, Dr. Bonita Rodriguez. Now, after a person has casted their votes for a particular candidate, what are the next steps that we should be more aware of, and how does that draw a positive change?
That's a great question, because I don't want people to walk away with the idea that voting is the only way to engage, especially after you vote for somebody and they're elected, right? We talked about Congressman Espaillat. So he's elected. Now what? Do you leave that individual to be the voice and do the work and you feel good about it because you helped elect them? The answer is no. Civic engagement is ongoing. You should continue to educate yourself. You should continue to be active. You should continue to attend events in your community and be part of those events. And in terms of the individuals, it doesn't stop when you elect someone. So you really do need to continue to engage by making sure that you're expressing your views, because even if somebody represents your values, as we talked about during the first part of the conversation, it doesn't mean you're always going to agree. I mean, we can agree to disagree. We want to do that respectfully and amicably. Other thing is, the person may not represent your exact demographic. So maybe you're both Dominican American, but you have different religious views. Well, at the point when something comes up around policy, legislation, or decisions that relate to a view that you have differences around, you want to be able to express those differences and express those views. So you have to continue to cultivate the relationship with the individual elected official, with their team, with other leaders in the community. So you should be attending events. You should be speaking up. The school board meeting gives you 3 minutes to speak as an individual. Be sure that you go there and you use your 3 minutes to talk about your lived experience, your views, and what you think could be beneficial to the community. The other thing that I want to touch on is the cultural nuances. So we know that the Latino community has very specific nuances that we grew up with. There is the humility component that sometimes is a hindrance for people to think about being in the spotlight, right? And so you have to grapple with, I grew up being told that I needed to be humble, that I needed to not question people in positions of authority because they know what they're doing. But we're telling you something different. We're telling you that being civically engaged means that you have a right and a responsibility to speak up about things that concern you, that you don't feel are being addressed by your leaders. And so there is a little bit of juggling around. I love my culture and I honor and respect that, but I also do have a responsibility to help make a positive change happen by speaking up, by participating, by being present. And that takes us to the point that there's no such thing as a little bit of engagement. Whatever level you're able to engage, whatever time you're able to commit, whatever energy you have to give is helpful. So if there is an elected official that is hosting an event, if you're able to cook for that event, if you're able to volunteer to do anything during the event, if you come in and set up before the event, but you can't stay for the event because you have responsibilities at home, that's okay. You're still part of that. You're still part of bringing about change. And so I don't want anybody to have in their mind that there is only one way to be civically engaged, and that if you're not doing things in a specific way that you're not helping. Every little bit counts. Every effort that each of one of us puts forward counts. And once I was at an event with then Secretary Lorraine Cortez Vasquez, who was the first Hispanic to have that position in New York State. And she made a comment that you can dedicate your time, money, or talent. And that stayed with me. And if it's true. So do you have time to dedicate? If you don't have time, do you have some financial support that you're able to give? If you have access to an organization through your leadership or other work that you do, can you bring elected officials? Can you bring community leaders to talk about some of those issues to help educate the rest of your community? This is an area where the churches and community organizations have also a responsibility to help bring information and resources to their constituents, to their congregants. And for me, it's not about religion or separation of church and state, but it's really about access. If your congregants are coming to your church, they trust you. There's a trust there that if you brought someone and said, this is not political, I'm not telling you to vote for them, this is not about who you're going to vote for, but they're your elected official, and I want them to talk about what they're doing to represent you, what they're doing to benefit you, what resources are available, then there's going to be a good relationship built between the elected officials, the community leaders, the religious leaders, and more importantly, the people. And then people feel like, okay, I know what's going on here. I know that this person represents me or doesn't represent me, and they can go out and cast their votes more confidently. So I just want to leave our community with the notion that you can make a positive difference by being part of the discussion. Whether you agree with individuals or not, there is a place for you. Sometimes when you participate in these meetings, community board meetings, etc., you realize that you're the only person that looks like you. You're the only person that represent your particular demographic groups. And all of a sudden, you're in a position to make one of two decisions. Either you're going to back out because you're intimidated and you don't find a space, or you're going to push forward and say, I need to be part of these meetings, every meeting that they have, and or maybe I will run for this position because I can make a difference just by being here, because nobody talks about people like me because they're not from the same background.
Can you talk to us more? Why is it important? Because this draws into being more engaged and making a positive community, a positive effect in your community.
I want to touch on your experience and the realization. I appreciate your transparency and saying with individuals that, you know, I didn't even really look up as much before. And the reason you did that is because of name recognition. It's the reason that so many politicians have held their seats for years and years and decades. You know, the political system was not created for one person to hold the power for all of these years. It was supposed to be that I could come in with my background and I could contribute serving a term or two terms, some years in the city council or the state assembly, and I would be able to bring about positive change. And you could come in with your expertise and experience, which is different than mine, and you could bring a positive impact in your community. But all of a sudden, it became an area where people are monopolizing particular seats and particular districts, and they're making decisions for the long term that impact all of us, but there's not room and space for others to engage. And this is why by you just showing up, you're making a positive difference, because you're the voice of reason sometimes, or you're the only one, as I talked about earlier, and as you in your own experience were able to share, you're the only one. And so just by showing up, you're changing the landscape, because all of a sudden everybody in the room is not from a particular racial or ethnic background because you showed up and you're one. And then if next time you come back and you bring your friend or your tia or, you know, your colleague who looks like you, then there are two, or somebody who's different than you and then the group, then even better. And you're helping to diversify that space and that conversation, which means you're creating a more equitable space so that different voices are shared and considerations are made for a diverse group of people that are in this country. And you're helping to advance the conversation and the changes that people are on the street protesting for, that people are asking for, right? It's what we're dealing with right now. And one of the other areas that you can, and I'll get to the school board, but one of the other areas that you can help with is with voter engagement. Because once you become an active voter, which is by voting in every election, regardless of whether it's a presidential election or not, and once you become an educated voter, where you, as you talked about, are researching the candidates and you know what they represent, you can talk to, educate, and help engage other voters. The elderly, for example, you can call them and say, I've read this about the different candidates. These are the top 3 points for each candidate's platform. This is what they represent. You don't have to push them to vote the way you're voting, but you can help educate them on what the candidates represent based on their websites, based on the rallies that they're doing, right? And help these individuals understand who's running so that they can make informed decisions. You can drive people to the polls. You can teach people what it's like on election day, what to expect, what happens when you walk into the polls. Some communities have a ballot where you have to write, others have machines. Just being able to engage voters in that way, or even be part of these efforts where you're texting individuals and saying, this is primary election day, be sure that you mail in your ballot, or be sure that you go to the polls that day. It's open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Just all of that information is power, and you're empowering others in your community, and you're empowered because you're making this positive difference. In terms of the school board, people don't realize that the school board votes on the content that the students are learning. So when you complain about, my kids are not learning about Hispanic heritage, or they're not learning about diversity, or they're not learning this or the other, well, you should be going to school board meetings and using your minutes to talk about those concerns that you have and what you would like your kids to learn, and kids in the community to learn. The school board decides things like property taxes. Do we raise property taxes or not? Everything from graduation. Right now, our school board voted to pay for a location to have the graduations for our 2 high schools because of social distancing, because of the regulations, and making sure that we were providing safe environments. So that's going to cost money. That's going to come out of the school district's budget. People don't realize that you have access as a voter, as a constituent. You have the right to read the agenda. It's on the website before the meetings. After the meetings, you have the right to access the minutes, to review, to ask questions, and to go there and use your 3 minutes. So I want people to know that they have rights to be able to access this information that impacts them personally and their community broadly, and even wider society. But not only do you have the right, you have the responsibility. And that's where civic engagement comes in. It's your right to be civically engaged, and it's a responsibility, because so many people before us died and fought for the right for us to be where we are. You talked about your parents instilling this in your family, and same with us. We take our kids to the polls because we want to make sure that they understand that they have the right to vote, but that they also have a responsibility to vote.
Dr. Damaris, Bonita Rodriguez, I wish that we could continue to discuss a lot of this, because it is a very important and imperative now and during these times to be able to discuss this. And we welcome you in the next few weeks so that we can continue to make this conversation and able to tell our audience, right, that are watching now, how important this is. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up, but I want to ask you, where can people contact you?
Sure. So I'm on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then, of course, by email, drdamarybonilla@gmail.com. And on all of those social media platforms, Dr. Damary Bonilla Rodriguez. And I'm open to the opportunity for us to continue the discussion, because I'd love for us to talk about what does it take to run for office at any level, and really educate our community on that experience, which is daunting to so many, but especially to Latinos.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to follow us on social media at Bellas Fashionistas and our media partner at BronxNet TV. To watch more of the programming, please visit our websites at bellasfashionistas.com and our media partner at BronxNet.org. Please be safe. Have a great day.